Let's now take a look at a series of studies and reports that have been published over the last decade shows that much of the country's development rests on the internet and good cybersecurity practices. Now, the rapid adoption of technology due to the lockdown saw e-commerce grow by a whopping 66%. This is from 14.1 billion rand as an industry in 2018 to more than 30 billion rand last year. Now, in the wake of this growth, South Africa suffered 577 cyber attacks per hour, resulting in 2.2 billion rand loss. At a global level, the World Economic Forum named cybersecurity among the top 5 threats to the next 20 years. Now, to discuss this further, I'm joined by a cybersecurity expert and founder of LawTrust, Maeson Maherry. Maeson, a very good morning to you from Cape Town. Let's get straight into it. First of all, just define cybersecurity. What is it, and how does cyber crime take place?
I think the most important thing to understand about this is that we are actually facing two pandemics at the moment. One we know about and we're dealing with it. The second one is slightly more hidden, and that is the cyber crime pandemic. So in order to understand what's happening, you've got to look at business today. Everything is going digital, as the studies have said. You cannot actually run a business without email, for example, or your database of clients. Even industry is digitalizing so that you can remotely control switches and all of these kind of things. Really, cyber has become the heart of our economy. Whether you see it or not, it is what has happened. So in order to protect this, you need special skills. Cybersecurity is not an entry-level position in the IT field. It's a specialization. But you need to understand how IT works, and then you need to be able to understand how the bad people are going to compromise these systems so that they can knock them out, and you must protect them. What an exciting industry to be in.
Of course, cybersecurity doesn't just, or cybercrime doesn't just happen to big industry. It happens to the everyday Joe, and somebody might be sitting at home unaware of what phishing emails are and how they look, and is that part of the 577 attacks that we've seen per hour over the last year? And how does just the average human being protect themselves from such attacks?
I suspect that the phishing attacks are not actually part of that number. Those will be more the ones that are affecting larger businesses. I think the number would be far worse if we look at phishing attacks. So how it actually works is that our industry, the IT industry, likes making up funny words to sound cool. What actually happens with a phishing attack is somebody is pretending to be somebody that you trust. They are impersonating a bank, and they're sending an email to you. You believe this. You click on the link and go to a fake site, and either they steal your login credentials or they load malware, some sort of malicious software onto your system. That actually is what a phishing attack is. And most attacks still happen like that, and it's such a serious thing. Things like ransomware are spreading by phishing attacks. You'll click on the link, it downloads this crypto code on your machine and locks all your data, locks you out of your system. It can happen to you as an individual, but it can also happen to a bank, as an example. So it's so important to be streetwise, to be aware, to think about where you are going when you click on a link. Really, it's only awareness and education that is the first step in helping us through this.
Now, let's look at it in terms of a bigger picture. Of course, South Africa's relatively well-developed financial infrastructure and, cyber infrastructure as well makes us a big player and an attractive customer within the cyberspace, especially attractive customer for cyber criminals. Now, there is the groundbreaking, that's what it's been called, the Cyber Crimes Act that is coming into effect at the end of June. That, as well as the Protection of Personal Information Act, together will be instituted from the 30th of June. How important is it for the country to have those two acts, essentially, to protect the businesses and the citizens of South Africa?
It's so important because there are no borders anymore when we're talking about this as well. So in order for South Africa to take its place in the community of nations, participate in the global economy, we have to be doing the right things to defend our country, but also tell everybody we are stable and we're open for business. And these acts are doing exactly that. You've got the protection of personal information, which is really telling businesses they must be responsible with the information that they're entrusted with. It's definitely a good thing, not a bad thing. And then the Cyber Crimes Bill is clarifying certain crimes so that we can have prosecution and we can keep everybody honest. You know, this space that we're talking about is slightly different. If something is stolen in the physical world, you investigate, you see the broken window, and you see something is gone. In the IT world, something can be stolen, and it's still there. You know, a copy of the information is stolen. So the laws need to be really clear about what is a crime and what are the powers to investigate it. But it is absolutely essential in keeping us a worldwide player.
What wouldn't be a crime? So the laws will hopefully clarify what a crime would be, but I don't know if you can, from the top of mind, give us an example of something that we might think would be a crime, but actually wouldn't be so illegal.
You know, I guess in the protection of personal information, it's still going to be possible for businesses to use the personal information of people. You know, so having any kind of personal information is not necessarily a bad thing. You will still be able to market to people, for example. You know, there's some misunderstandings about that. The only difference is you're just going to have to ask permission before the time. You know, you have to get the buy-in, the acceptance from people. You know, so it's not going to vilify the use of personal information totally, but it is going to make businesses responsible and think about and understand what information they have and should they protect it and how are they using it. You know, it's about a deeper understanding in businesses.
Speaking of personal information, I mean, so many of us, we go onto a website and the cookies notification pops up. We just select OK or accept and we move on. We never really read what's written. Same thing when we sign on to T's and C's of whatever apps we might download onto our phones. Do the businesses have any responsibility to make that kind of information easier to disseminate for the average user, or is it up to the average user to sit down and essentially do a test and study what is written on these T's and C's before we accept them?
You know, it's a bit of both. So we all know no one really reads these long contracts, you know, but we've seen the bad effect of not communicating properly to the public with the whole WhatsApp debacle that happened, you know, where people en masse were leaving the platform and they're saying, you know, these guys are listening to our conversations, you know, they're trying to steal my personal information, and that wasn't actually the case. You know, so we saw there what poor communication or heavy-handed communication can do to your business. You know, so it is so important to communicate simply and clearly. You know, and it's just about the basics. Why are you asking for this information? What are you going to do with it? How long are you going to keep it? And the business needs to understand that they shouldn't be keeping information that, you know, is not necessary for the performance of their business. You know, this is all responsible business. It's even more important for a business that they understand this information because they have to protect it. In case of a cyber attack, they definitely are liable for that information, and they should be looking after it for you. You know, so they should be helping you understand what they're doing, how they're protecting it. But of course, there's always an onus on you as well to learn about these things. And I love saying, you know, that we should be streetwise. You know, we're streetwise. We pride ourselves on it. In the digital street, we've got to be streetwise as well. So you have to start learning. You've got to look where you're going when you click on a link. You've got to read emails. If something is too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. You know, streetwise.
In terms of the cyber attacks that you speak of, if there is a cyber attack on a business, I mean, we've seen, for instance, Apple's cloud storage being hacked. I mean, this was years ago, and a lot of people's personal information, pictures, and other things were essentially put on the internet for people to see. What is the role that the big business has to play when it comes to protecting its consumer or customer? And, you know, if there is a cyber attack, when should it be reported? When should the customer be made aware of it? And what recourse does the customer have as well in that instance?
You know, I think the first thing is the business is responsible. So let's just make that very clear. You know, I think one of the things that has not happened is that cybersecurity people do not have a seat at the table necessarily when business discussions are happening. You know, and really it should be incorporated into every facet of business. You know, cybersecurity should be thought of in every business and in every project that you're engaging in, you know, so that really hasn't happened because the business is responsible for the information that you are entrusting them with. You know, they're going to have to look after that. Almost all businesses are vulnerable, and the basics are the most important thing that they've got to be looking after. It's not necessarily the fancy stuff. You know, a whole lot of the attacks are coming in where there are known vulnerabilities. So businesses should be looking at good housekeeping. Good housekeeping starts with understanding all this information that you are dealing with and understanding what IT assets and information assets you have. You've got to then keep your systems current. You've got to upload the patches, just like a user at home needs to update the apps on their phone. You've got to do these things, because a big thing that's happening is not about the new features, it's about fixing security vulnerabilities that have become known. So patching your systems, updating your apps. This is a fundamental thing that has to happen. And I guess it'll probably block 80% of the attacks. It is really that important. When something like this does happen, once the POPI Act is enacted, you will be having to report to the information regulator. So it is potentially punitive. It can damage your reputation. So it is so important rather to be proactive instead of being reactive. Once something like this has happened, you've got to get in experts. It could take you a year to recover from something like a company-wide ransomware. Who has that kind of time to deal with it? And in fact, which business can survive that kind of thing happening? It's far more important to be proactive at this stage.
Of course, and we can learn from countries such as America. We've seen plenty of cyber crimes happening there, especially when it comes to where Russia are in play. South Africa, we are looking to play on that playing field, as well as the continent. But how important is it for us to learn from the likes of the USA, the likes of China and India as well, who are certainly leaders when it comes to the cyberspace?
These countries have realized that they can export expertise. So that is what's important for us as well. South Africa would like to take a place at the table, deal more strongly into Africa as well. We have to have programs in place that we are bringing cyber-skilled individuals to the party. That is the most important thing. China, India, they've got millions of people that are studying IT, at a high level of skill, and that is why they are exporting these skills. So we have to understand that this is the future. Money is becoming more digital. If you just think about that one thing, it tells you how important cyber is for the future. So we have to realize it's important. We've got to educate. Again, cybersecurity is not an entry-level position in the IT field. It's a specialist area. So you've got to understand IT, and then on top of that, you've got to learn cybersecurity. So these are not things we can turn on tomorrow and have 10,000 cybersecurity specialists. You've got to start talking about the field, and it's cool. Cybersecurity is cool. This is where things are happening at the moment. It is a wonderful feeling to be able to prevent a crime, to help a business do better business by using crypto-type technologies. It's a great space to be, but we've got to plan ahead, and we've got to start getting our skills more ready to play.
Yep, it's a big, big industry. Maeson Maherry, thank you so much for your time as a cybersecurity expert and founder of LawTrust.